Welcome to Unspoken Affairs. In today's video, I'm sharing a story that I never thought I would look back on with laughter. At the time, it was embarrassing, awkward, and left me wanting to vanish into thin air. But as life often does, it surprised me. What started as one of the most uncomfortable weekends of my college years ended up being the start of an unexpected bond. One that has stayed with me far longer than I ever imagined. The summer heat in Austin, Texas, was merciless that year. It wasn't just hot, it was the kind of sweltering heat that made the air ripple like waves above the asphalt and turned even the shortest walk into a battle against nature. People darted from one patch of shade to the next, clutching iced coffees or water bottles as if they were lifelines. I'd lived through plenty of Texas summers, but that particular August felt like the sun had turned its attention specifically on us. Determined to test our endurance, I was 21 at the time, a junior at the University of Texas, trying to keep my head above water between lectures, assignments, and my part-time job at a small local bookstore. My name is Rachel Miller, and back then, life felt like it was rushing forward faster than I could process. I shared a 2-bedroom apartment with my best friend, Emily Carter. We'd met our first year in the dorms, instantly clicking during a late-night study session that turned into a 3-hour rant about cafeteria food. By the end of freshman year, we were inseparable. And when the opportunity came to rent a modest apartment together, just a short bus ride from campus, it felt like the perfect step into adulthood that week. The air conditioner in our apartment had given out. It sputtered, groaned, and then died dramatically 2 days before. I had called the landlord, who assured me he'd send a repairman as soon as possible. If you've ever rented, you know what that means. It could be tomorrow, or it could be next month. So, in the meantime, Emily and I were stuck with a ceiling fan that spun lazily in the living room, doing little more than shifting the hot air from one corner to the other. Emily was luckier than me. Her boyfriend had a fully functioning air conditioner, and she didn't hesitate to spend most of her time at his place until ours was fixed. She invited me more than once, but I was buried under assignments and a deadline for a paper that loomed over me like a storm cloud. I had a spray bottle of water on my desk to mist myself every few minutes while I typed, pretending it made a difference. That Friday, after a long shift at the bookstore, I dragged myself home drenched in sweat and exhaustion. I loved my job, but it was demanding. Customers always seemed to come alive right before closing, frantically searching for obscure titles or insisting they'd placed orders that didn't exist in the system. By the time I locked up and started my walk home, the Texas sun had turned the streets into an oven. My only goal was to make it back to the apartment, down a glass of ice water, and shower until I felt like a human again. When I stepped inside, the apartment greeted me with the same heavy, stagnant heat. I kicked off my shoes by the door and dropped my bag onto the couch with a thud. The silence was comforting. Emily had already told me she'd be with her boyfriend all weekend, which meant I had the place to myself. A whole weekend of peace and quiet sounded like heaven. No roommate clattering in the kitchen, no shared bathroom scheduled to negotiate, just me, the silence, and hopefully some time to finally get ahead on my assignments. I poured myself a tall glass of water, filled it with ice cubes, and drank it down in one long gulp. The relief was temporary, but necessary. Without wasting another moment, I headed straight for the shower. The water wasn't cold. Our apartment rarely managed that luxury, but it was lukewarm enough to soothe my overheated skin. I stood under the stream longer than usual, letting the water run over me, trying to wash away not just the sweat and dust from the day, but the stress that had been building all week. When I finally stepped out, I wrapped myself in a towel and padded into my bedroom. I was relaxed, comfortable, and most importantly, convinced I was alone. I tossed the damp towel onto my desk chair and stood in front of my closet, absently flipping through hangers, debating between pajamas and my favorite worn-out t-shirt with shorts. That's when it happened. The bedroom door swung open. For a second, I froze, my mind refusing to process what was happening. Standing in the doorway was Daniel Carter Millie's older brother. My stomach dropped and my face burned hot enough to rival the Texas sun. He wasn't supposed to be there. Emily hadn't mentioned a word. Daniel's eyes widened in shock before darting away, his face flushing crimson. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," he stammered, immediately turning his back to me. His hand gripped the doorknob like it was the only thing keeping him upright. "I didn't know you were here. I thought the place was empty. Emily told me I could stay for the weekend. I swear I didn't mean." I scrambled for the towel, wrapping it tightly around myself, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure he could hear it. "Daniel, you can't just walk in like that." My voice cracked between embarrassment and indignation. "I swear I didn't mean to," he said again, his words tripping over themselves in panic. "I thought Emily was gone, and He backed out quickly, shutting the door behind him. The silence that followed was deafening. I sat on the edge of my bed, burying my face in my hands. The humiliation was overwhelming. It had been a genuine accident, I knew that. But the thought of him walking in, seeing me so vulnerable, made me want to crawl under the bed and never come out. That night, I stayed in my room, tiptoeing out only when I was sure he had gone to sleep. I grabbed a snack from the kitchen in the dark and scurried back like a burglar in my own home. The embarrassment clung to me, heavy and suffocating. The next morning, I awoke with a resolve. I couldn't spend the entire weekend hiding. Daniel was Emily's brother. He wasn't going anywhere. And neither was I. I showered, dressed in jeans and a plain t-shirt, and walked into the kitchen with my heart pounding like a drum. He was sitting at the table, a notebook open in front of him, scribbling something. When he looked up and saw me, his face turned red again. He cleared his throat. "Rachel, I just want to apologize again. Yesterday was a huge mistake. I should have knocked. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable." I poured myself a cup of coffee, forcing myself to act casual. "It's fine, really. Let's just forget about it." Relief spread across his face.
Thanks.
"I promise I'll stay out of your way." But staying out of each other's way wasn't easy. The apartment was small and we kept running into each other passing in the hallway, reaching for mugs in the kitchen, even sitting in the living room at the same time. At first, the air between us was thick with unspoken awkwardness. But as hours passed, something shifted. While I typed away at my laptop, Daniel sat across from me, writing notes in his notebook. Eventually, curiosity got the better of me. "What are you working on?" I asked. He looked up, surprised I'd spoken. "Just some ideas for my internship report. I was with an engineering firm this summer, and I'm trying to put my notes in order." "That sounds complicated," I said. He shrugged with a small smile. "It is, but I like it. Honestly, though, I missed Austin. And real food. I've been living on microwavable noodles all summer." I laughed, the tension finally breaking. Before I knew it, we were chatting like old friends. We ended up ordering pizza that evening, watching reruns of some sitcom. And by the time Emily called to check in, Daniel and I were already trading jokes and laughing at the ridiculous plotlines. By Sunday evening, the awkwardness had faded completely. We sat on the balcony together, sipping sodas as the sun dipped below the horizon, finally giving Austin a break from the suffocating heat. A soft breeze rustled the trees, and for the first time all weekend, I felt at ease. "You know," Daniel said, "this weekend turned out way better than I expected, even with the awkward start." I laughed, shaking my head. "Don't remind me. That's not how I wanted to meet you." "Trust me," he said, grinning. "I didn't want it that way either. But hey, at least it makes for a funny story someday." "Funny for you, maybe," I teased. "For me, it's mortifying." But secretly, I knew he was right. Someday it would just be a ridiculous, embarrassing story, but one worth telling. What mattered more was that we'd moved past it and unexpectedly started to build a bond when Emily returned that night. She walked in to find us still talking on the couch, laughing like we'd known each other for years. She raised an eyebrow and smirked. "Well, looks like you two hit it off." Daniel and I exchanged a glance and burst into laughter. That weekend taught me something I never expected, that sometimes the most uncomfortable, humiliating moments can become the doorway to new friendships. What started as a nightmare ended up as the beginning of a bond that lasted long after the embarrassment faded. Even now, whenever Daniel visits, he makes a big show of knocking on my door and saying, "Permission to enter, Rachel." And every time, without fail, we both laugh until our sides hurt. Life is unpredictable. Some moments leave scars, but others leave stories worth telling, stories that remind us that awkward beginnings don't always mean awkward endings. And this one will always be the story of the weekend I thought I'd never live down, only to find it brought someone new into my life.